Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. When it comes to news in EVE Online, at least on the development news front, it has been another quiet week, which is kind of normal, of course. It is summertime, but I also have to say that I'm seeing quite a few rumblings at the moment on the subreddit about the low current activity in the game, and quite a few people are worried as to where all of this is going. I'll try to give you guys my opinion on this in a nutshell. I think the problem is, which has been pointed to quite often, I would say, in those threads, that CCP has upped the prices for subscriptions and everything else in the game, and then made promises for the largest content update we've ever seen. But of course, we're still waiting to see exactly what's going to happen and what the plans are for the game, and that's not very conducive, especially I would say exacerbated, of course, by the fact that it is a first summer of freedom, which we've had in a couple, which we haven't had for a couple of years, and so lots of people, I think, are deciding that at the moment they don't want to put time in EVE Online. On the broader scale, my opinion is that all of this has started with skill injectors. I would say that skill injectors was well, at the time an understandable idea that the CSP implemented to get more revenue going, but I warned right off the bat that in my view skill injectors would be something that would bring revenue to the present back then, but would come at the cost of longevity in the game. And I do think that in part we are seeing this type of effect. They are working hard on the new player experience, but the shortcut exists in the game, and so on the one hand you'll have players that will take advantage of the skill injector shortcut, but on the other hand I also think that you'll have a lot of players that will see this as a pay-to-win mechanic and that will not be motivated to stick with EVE Online because they see that other players can just, you know, pay their way ahead of them, and that's just not fun. That's not very motivating. I think that's at the core of the current decline in EVE Online. I myself personally have been playing the game for too long, sunk cost fallacy, all that type of stuff, so I'm definitely still keeping an eye on everything, waiting to see what happens next, and I am in maintenance mode for my personal gameplay, but I do have some stuff that I'm doing at the moment, such as preparing my move to Galente space and make that my number one place of activity, because next big update should be about faction warfare. Kind of hoping that they're making that like universally accessible without being all too punishing for like reputations and things like that. And then I want to be ready for that if it is cool, of course. But yeah, unfortunately, you could say at the moment EVE Online is not doing all that well. Player activity is substantially down, and let's take a look, of course, what all of that means for the market. But before we get on to that, let's take a quick look at the New Eden store. So here's the New Eden store. Alright, nothing really marked at this point, so we've got the XIX skins that are here, Fate, Oasis of Fate skins, Rada Sunset skins, so just showcasing quite a few skins. And then if we go to the services tab, also nothing on sale or anything like that to report, just the bundle prices. Okay, well, that means that we get to move on to the market. And we start with plex and stuff at 350. Let's put that down there and start with those pilot services. And part of the problem, well, problem, if you want to call it that, it's a choice that CCP has made, is this one right here. We are seeing in GDAV for 4 million ISK for a plex at the moment, 3.8 million for the buyers. They have been forced up as well. And you can see that the upward trend, despite the fact that we are in summertime, is here, and this at much lower volumes than before. So this is also an indication or a sign that there is lower activity in the game, and that the higher cost of playing EVE Online is definitely a part of the equation here. You can also see that the min-max prices have gone up, or I would say that the max prices especially have been teetering on breaking through the 4 million mark, but I would say that we're here to stay, and that this is just going to be the new reality for Plex. 4 million might just become a floor for sellers at this point, and buyers will be forced up. Otherwise, there just isn't going to be supply unless you pony up a lot of ISK in the game at the moment. If you take a look outside the JITA, yeah, hardly any competition. That's also pretty unique. Usually you do get a little bit more activity in the Tranquility Trading Tower as well, trying to eke out a little bit of an edge compared to JITA. For the buyers, we do see a little bit more activity in the Perimeter Trading Tower. Again, also kind of normal for those that want to save a buck. So the buyers are coming in here, and they're being more aggressive than in JITA 4.4, but that competition is of course very close, I think, because you can trade through the app here as well. But at the moment the pressure is up for Plex, and this despite the summer. It's counter to my intuition. I thought that summertime would bring a little bit of relief for Plex prices, but I would say this is atypical, generally speaking, from all of my years playing EVE Online. Summertime has always been low Plex prices, but I guess the extra real life cost for Plex and accounts and things like that just is unstoppable, and the market has to find that new balance with those new prices. Then we've got the multiple pilot training certificate, obviously doing a catch-up move on this one. It was a little bit expected a couple of weeks ago. I mentioned that, well, when we were getting close to 2 billion for 1 month subscription, doesn't make that much sense that you're at around 1.5 billion for a multiple pilot training certificate. While it's not the exact same service and there is a bit of a premium because of how good or how much Plex can do, that gap is likely to close, and here you can see in the last couple of weeks we've definitely done that, shooting up towards 1.75 billion to start training a second character on your account. So 1.75 billion for the sellers and almost 1.6 billion for the buyers as well, where before you could basically grab one for almost 1.5, now buyers are up to 1.6 as well. So that upwards pressure is showing through here quite a lot as well. I think it's gonna close even more at this point if you're starting to decide, or if you're feeling this upward pressure on prices and hesitation because of the higher cost of things. Then obviously getting a second character training on your account for less than what it would take to keep an account subbed does have a meaningful attraction, I think, and we're just gonna see this close up quite substantially. Then we've got these skill extractors, obviously similar to the Plex chart. I think potentially as well finding that new range that's just going to become the reality going forward. 457 million for the sellers, 446 for the buyers. So super narrow margin here, just above 10 million between sellers and buyers. That's correct. Yeah, that is correct. So showing that buyers are basically forced up. If they don't pony up the ISK, then supply just isn't there. A little bit surprising to see volumes doing better compared to the Plex volumes, although they are down. We are seeing slightly less of a loss, I would say, in volumes for the skill extractors. And then we've got the injectors. Here are the large scale injectors plateauing at a high point, seeing a little bit of pressure down here on those minimum prices, trying to get back to 750 million, but we are at 800 million for the sellers, 770 for the buyers as well. I would say kind of the same story, that pressure from Plex is going to translate to that higher new average for the large scale injectors, and we are discovering that price point in the middle of summer here. Small scale injectors actually doing a little bit of a pullback, but I would say landing on that new reality of around 160 million on the chart, 161.5 for the sellers and 153 million for the buyers as well. There is obviously a high range where the market says that's too much ISK as well. It is still supply and demand, but we just have to accept that because of the higher cost, real life cost, and that's involved in these pilot services, that Plex, ISK cost has gone up as well, and that is probably here to stay. Finally, we've got the daily alpha injector that is hovering, I would say, decently healthily around the 45 million mark. In the last week went down a little bit and then went back up, a little bit of a volume bump all of a sudden. Not sure what that is. I don't think it was a sale. Let me know in the comments if there was like a small sale on daily alpha injectors. Otherwise it could also be like a liquidation or something like that. Currently 47 million for the sellers, 43 for the buyers, 45 being right in the middle of that. I still hold to the theory that this is actually a good hook for alpha players, but overall, of course, I personally am against the injector concept in EVE Online. As I've said, I do think this is what is costing longevity to the game of EVE Online, and it's just making it harder for CCP to convert new players into subscribers, long-term subscribers, because why would you put that effort of training the old-fashioned way when you know that someone else can just create a character, pony up some real life money, get the large skill injectors and just zoom past you as if it's nothing? That I think is part of the equation there as well. And then finally we get the hyper cores, maybe to be in touch a little bit with the general feeling, apparently going back up from that 400,000 disc mark. So again, I do think this is going to be the new reality. 400k might just become a floor at the moment, at least as long as stuff is being traded. And as a result, at the moment we're actually seeing upwards pressure to 410 for the sellers, 390 for the buyers. But you can see when we went up above 400,000 disc, here are those much lower volumes, which is what's happening at the moment in general in the game. Next up, we have the mineral market coming in at 1120. Yeah, 1120. I think I can stretch it to that price point as we get to titanium first, of course. And you can see it's trying to climb out of the bottom, made its way above 3.8 on the chart. Sellers are coming in at, if we go to GDA at least, 383, buyers are at 369, so still a pretty narrow margin here, showing that there is demand for the mining activities out there. But of course, on the 1 year chart, this is still not a great price. Kind of the same story, although it's not related to the cost of plex, but to the patches that CCP has introduced into the game. The need for titanium in general has gone down in industry, and as a result, 380 plus might actually be a good price for titanium, where it's actually worth selling. And then we get pyrite, which last week was working its way back up a little bit. Trend is slowly breaking down, although the 20-day moving average does look like it's still slowly trending up here. We're clearly hesitating at the moment to stay above 9. We are at 912 for the sellers and just below 9 is for the buyers as well. So super narrow margin. There is demand for these minerals. I do think that larger groups, players, established players in nullsec would rather put their efforts into building the most powerful ships in the game, which, despite the fact that some of them have been nerfed substantially, is still the larger ships. So they would love to have more Titans, Supers, Carriers, Dreadnoughts to throw out there and to burn down a whole empire. That takes a lot of titanium, a lot of pyrite, so there is demand for that at the moment. And yeah, in the new reality, after all of the industry changes, the rebalancings and things like that, I honestly think that this could still be an okay price for you to get for your pyrite. And then we've got Mexalon seeing a little bit of pressure here as well. Did not hold on to 60 at the moment, but you can see at the tail end here, 5-day moving average trying to cross 20-day moving average again. I think around 60 could just be where we're at as well. 59.85, so just below 60 for the sellers. 58.14 for the buyers as well. Very, very narrow margin between sellers and buyers. Same story for HiSec, right? Your 1 year value, especially if you look at pyrite and if you look at titanium, has gone down, but at the moment you're probably still in a tight market where the current prices are okay. I don't think you want to hoard too much stuff. The value for mining in HiSec, it is relatively safe, is what it is, and at the moment I would say we're right on the average of what we can expect longer term. A little bit of a different story for the other ones. Here is lowsec with Isogen going back down below 400 disc on the average price. You can see those max prices just steadily declining, and that is that story that I talked about after we went above 300 to 350 ISK, that we are going going to get periods of hesitation before we find the true value of Isogen if we look at the price from active demand and active supply. These are probably just old holdings that are finding their way to the market as we try to sell at 450 and above, but they're still happy with 430, still happy with 420, and so let's see if that's what we can find here. We're down to 390 for the first sellers, and still I would say that the story is true, and we're seeing even more pressure. I did not expect them to go this low, but yeah, here's 18 million units at 390, then we get a couple of 10s at 391, then we get a 13 at just below 395, 396, another 30 million. Here's a 401 for 10 million units. So this is what's driving the decline in price. And of course, I would say that it is more likely in the current summer slump for this to be very effective, because 100 million units of Isogen on this lower activity can really flood the market and bring prices down a lot more quickly than if we had twice as much activity in general. So the low volumes are helping crash these prices down very quickly on just a few tens of millions of units, trying to take advantage of these better prices. Also showing a little bit of desperation basically for these sellers as well, a little bit of hesitation as they're just willing to blow through 400 disk as well and go down to 390 for Isogen. And then we've got Noxium that's also continuing the downtrend. Maybe they're looking at the bigger picture on that as well. We just went through 1000 disk and there is still no sign of stopping for Noxium. We're down to 884 for the sellers and 879 for the buyers. Perhaps there is also an equation that you can make. You get X amount of Noxium per cubic meter and you get X amount of Isogen per cubic meter potentially. And so from that calculation you could derive that, all right, with Noxium being worth 1100 disk, you can expect Isogen to maybe make its way to 500, 550. I don't know exactly what the correlation or the amounts are, but as Noxium, which is actually, I don't think so. Let's take a quick look at the volumes here. Couple million on most sell orders, but you're not seeing 10 million finding their way. Nope, 6 million has been the biggest one so far. Yeah, so you're not seeing 10, 20, 30 million units all of a sudden finding their way to take advantage of potential prices. No, all of that is not here. This is active supply versus active demand. And of course, if Noxium then just goes below 900 disk, that might just mean for a lot of players that, yeah, 450, 400 disk for Isogen, no, not with Noxium prices as they are, that's not going to work out. And so here, that might be the reason why some sellers are just willing to go to 390 and not even trying to defend 400 at this point. We will of course again see how all of that works out later down the line. You may already have spotted that on the ticker as well, but nullsec seems to be doing another jump up. So here is Zydrine pulled back a little bit from a one-year high point when we went to almost 2000 disk. If you look at this max range here, I think we touched 2000 disk on a day. We did pull back from that, heading back towards 1500, but we're back on the upswing. 1700 disk for Zydrine, 1627 for the buyers as well, and then Megasite just going to another one-year high point, 1750 for the sellers and 1640 for the buyers, really outpacing nullsec all of a sudden by quite a bit. I would say Megasite is probably around double the price of Noxium, which right here, let's say 6 months ago, you had 750 for Megasite, and then Noxium from lowsec was actually more expensive by 50% or so. So this is a very, very big and very quick, in my book here, reversal where nullsec minerals have become really expensive all of a sudden compared to the lowsec ones, and have regained their status as being the most expensive minerals, except of course for the final one. Here is Morphite, that is still slowly edging down at the moment. Below 41,000 now for the sellers and 38,000 for the buyers. Buyers below 40k for Morphite. This to me is a sign that there is this lower activity that is also starting to creep into just, demand for some of these items. Morphy Tech 2, I think Tech 2 is quite saturated at the current low prices, and so this is going to be one of the casualties of those lower prices. But what's different, right? Why do we see some lower prices in, for instance, High-Tech Minerals and in Morphy, and for Pilot Services you're just seeing everything being expensive? Is of course because this is in-game effort for the minerals, whereas this is just the jumped up real-life prices for the Pilot Services. Let's see if PI can survive this type of a storm then, coming in at 1945. So PI is another one which, in my experience, historically during summer times has gone down substantially because it's very passive and it's very easy to maintain PI supplies, and then on lower activity you would get oversupply and thus lower prices. But so far this year we've seen the exact reverse of that, and that is in all likeliness the Siege Green update that has made it more accessible to make larger ships, and that actually has increased demand for PI apparently. So let's see what's happening here. Broadcast nodes, yeah, despite the low activity, it's actually managing to creep its way back towards 1.5 million for the average prices, above that for the sellers and just below that for the first buyer. Bit of a gap opening up here though, buyers heading well below 1.4 million pretty quickly, and demand not that strong. So I'm not sure if this PI bull market, you could say, slight bull market, or at least a market that's holding on to decent average prices, will be able to survive the entire summer. I'm not sure. Then we've got the construction blocks close to a one-year high point above 9,000. This losing a little bit of ground at the tail end, but I mean, this is just a dream price, a dream chart for anyone that's making construction blocks. 9,200 for the sellers, 8,900 for the buyers. Also really narrow margin here between sellers and buyers. That does show very strong demand. You can browse a lot as well, stay above 8k for quite a while. So very strong demand for construction blocks. It's going to be interesting to see. This one is actually feeling like, yeah, we could be here at these higher prices for quite a while. And I think that, yeah, this is probably part of the story as well. What's needed is some of these advanced PI materials, but perhaps there's too many players trying to eke out those margins for the final products, and so there's not that many that are just maintaining their construction blocks or their coolants or those base products, and as a result we are seeing lots of demand for these goods and pretty damn good prices. Here are the coolant. This is the coolant chart staying above 8,750, which may not look as juicy, but yeah, 9,200 for the sellers, 8,900 almost for the buyers. It's definitely another really good price and another very small margin between sellers and buyers, showing that demand is pretty strong for coolants at the moment. And we must not forget that the coolants market basically got nerfed because the need for water, just like the need for titanium, was cut down substantially across blueprints in the industry chains. So as a result, this actually put coolant right back with everything else, but it's holding on very, very nicely. Enriched uranium losing a little bit of ground here, but it's relative. We just come from 11,000 disc a couple of weeks ago, so a very high price, down to just below 10,000 for the sellers, 9,400 for the buyers. Again, another 500 disc margin, which is not a lot for these PI materials. Usually you'd get a 10%, you'd get a 1,000 disc margin or something like that when you get to 10k. So this does feel like demand is pretty damn strong here again for enriched uranium. Integrity response drones actually making their way back above 2.5 million as well. 2.6 for the sellers, 2.5 for the buyers. The biggest winner of the Siege Green update, of course, the need for the integrity response drones has gone up substantially. And despite the fact that this was also, something that I thought could happen, right, is that you would have the reflex, all right, they are going to like nerf PI a little bit and things like that in the Siege Green update to make carriers and dreadnoughts easier to build, which should potentially like reduce prices. That's the whole goal of it. But the increased demand all of a sudden, because the players do want to make lots of dreadnoughts, do want to make lots of carriers, means that you get increased demand for these goods and thus higher prices, despite the fact that they may have been nerfed in their usages. And as a result, we're seeing here this massive premium on integrity response drones, 2.5 million, really good price. And this is probably also driving demand for everything below it that might be needed in order to produce these integrity response drones. It's actually pretty impressive to see how well that has worked from the PI market perspective. Mechanical parts here, 10,000 for the sellers, 9.3 for the buyers. You know, also still a relatively small margin between sellers and buyers. And look at these buyers here in and around JITA. There's definitely quite a lot of them staying above 9,000 ISK for quite a while as well. So pretty impressive performance so far for most of the PI materials. Miniature electronics coming back down, but from basically a nice breakout to 1 year high points above 12,500 ISK, which is at 11.5 for the sellers and 10,000 ISK for the buyers. Volume wise, it's not that great, but this is still pretty damn impressive. Nano factories, seeing a little bit of pressure on that one, 950,000 to 880,000, but still on this full 1 year chart, it's holding on to the average. And you also have that June increase in price with the Siege Green update, which hasn't been like completely negated at this point either. You're still paying a bit of a premium there. Organic mortar applicators, same story, landing on 700k, which is not great. 730 to 700,000 is not great, but it's a narrow margin, and you're still paying that premium compared to 3-4 months ago. Recursive computing modules, there are exceptions to the rules, of course. These one are hovering at the 1 year low points, 850 for the sellers, 730 for the buyers, and this is probably the pattern. If things will break down, sellers will hesitate to go down, but you just open up a big margin as demand evaporates. Right here, look at that, above 100,000 ISK margin between sellers and buyers. So that's way more than 10% on this one, showing that it's going to potentially be a demand side slump that's going to start to cause prices to go back down. But for now, almost all of them are holding on really well. Robotics, for instance, able to hold on to 75,000 ISK, 77 for the sellers and 74 for the buyers. Again, really narrow margin, close to 1 year high points. Although historically used to be 100k for robotics, I think we still have to keep in mind that this is pretty passive, and this is actually on this 1 year chart a pretty impressive increase in price, and it's able to do so on the current demand, which is also in my book pretty impressive. Rocket fuels working on another 1 year high point, 12,300 for the sellers, 10,680 for the buyers. Right here you get a bit more margin. If sellers start to go up a little bit too aggressively, that's also something that is going to open up a margin. This will probably get plugged by supply that can be brought online, or that's ready, some old reserves or something like that. But still, 10,680 for the buyers of a refined PI material does show that in the more basic stuff, demand is quite strong. Self-harmonizing power cores next, another winner for the Siege Green update right here in May. Staying above 2 million ISK, not bad at all. 2-1 to almost 2-1. Again, that narrow margin. When demand is here, they're very aggressive. If that and the most likely outcome, or the most likely problem, danger for the PI market is of course that demand drops off, and then you could open up a margin quickly, and then you could see prices go down quickly as well. But so far we're doing really well. Smart Fab units, right, when demand is not there, here's a 65 to 55,000. That's a pretty damn big margin. More hesitation, but they're really more exceptions. Most of them are doing quite well. 930 to 826. Straddle conduits, not that hot at the moment either. Then we get our supercomputers that are holding on to 70k on this one, and here it's a bit of a tiny market, not a lot of supply, not too much demand, still only 7,000 discs, that's 10%. It's a normal market. This one is, in my opinion, still pretty balanced. Then we've got synthetic oil that's dropping off very quickly. It did make its way about a month ago above 10,000 discs, which was really good, but it cannot hold on to those gains. 8,000 for the sellers and 5.3 for the buyers, and that's the real danger, in my opinion, for the PI market, right? If we do get more of a summer slump and more reasons for players that they just don't want to play too much EVE Online, the last thing you're gonna just completely give up, and is probably your PI, one of the easiest, fastest routines to do on a daily basis. But if the demand size drops off, yeah, then you've got these types of numbers, huge margins, and then a massive drop off in price. Look at those minimum prices, 1 year low points all of a sudden. That could happen very, very quickly. Of course, it would be a sign of real collapse in the game. We'll keep an eye on it. Let's hope it doesn't happen from the perspective of us that want to keep playing the game for a long time. But who knows? We can't disregard the risk either. Here are the synthetic synapses, 93k to 82k, more healthy margin, but a little bit of a different story on this one and the transcranial microcontrollers, of course. These have peaks when something happens around implants into the game, and that just happened less than a month ago right here, went up to 100,000 discs. We give back a little bit of room here, and we're probably slowly starting to get back into a more normal supply demand situation. Transcranial microcontrollers basically still pretty high at almost 90,000 ISK, 88 to 78 for most buyers. That's actually a normal margin. Again, there's one buyer here that's probably, I'm not sure why you'd be this aggressive, but all right. I do think it's only one of them. We can't disregard this. So despite the fact that this one is actually pretty high in price, from the margin perspective here, I do feel like this could be the new balance, the new current range for transcranial microcontrollers. Another one that's never done so hot is water-cooled CPU, and here you can see that the problems are starting to get worse. Right, the goods that didn't have demand just don't have demand for 3, and then we get to 2,800 very quickly. That for a fine PI materials, with most of the others going for 10,000 disc. Let's just hope that is the problem of usage. Water-cooled CPU does have water in it. Does it require water? Yep, so that one has been hit by nerfs as well in the general usage for one of its most basic components, but this pressure here is clearly a demand side problem. And then we get wetware mainframes that's seeing some minimum prices drop off here as well. We're talking 1.7 million still for the sellers, but below 1.5 million for the buyers. That margin is starting to open up, so there is a little bit of danger for demand collapse here as well. And we'll see, of course, if we hold on, if we can keep the manufacturing cycles going in nullsec, if there is enough potential conflict and things like that out there to keep our high prices going, or will the summer time cause more of them to show signs of trouble. Next up, advanced moon materials at 32 minutes. Let's take a look at these general story. Oversupplied, massively oversupplied, as moon materials were basically doubled in yield, and nullsec especially, but I think also players, larger groups in up to 0.5 systems decided to really invest into moon mining. And so if we start here with the carbide items, here is crystalline carbonite for Galente production. Managed a couple of days back above 100 ISK, but clearly we are still seeing pressure and trying to find the bottom. 94 for the sellers and 85, then 80 and 73 for the buyers in and around JIDA. That's going down very quickly, and I think I did warn you guys quite often that sure, this all looks like we're doing new 1 year low points. These are incredibly low prices, but I think warned you guys about catching a falling knife. And here the danger that exists is that we are in this oversupply situation. There's huge amounts of these things just slugging around the entire economy. If then you get the same story as with PI, you get a demand collapse, which is exactly what you're seeing right here, then this might not be the end. We might go to even lower prices. And so despite reaching 1-year low points, and you do have a little bit of investment money that came into into the crystalline carbonate market, they were not willing to push well above 100 ISK anymore at this point. And then if the rest of the demand is basically satiated, here's the evaporation of all of that. This could mean that the bottom is not in for crystalline carbonate. Let's see what it's like for titanium carbide for Caldari. Went back below 125, so this one still has a ways to go get back below 100 ISK, but we're back on the investment cycle here, so a bit of investing, some ISK flowing into the market below 125, but now we're at 124 for the sellers, 127 for the buyers. Yeah, apparently Caldari does have a little bit of a premium to it, probably because they are amazing ships with shields and missiles. That's my theory on that one, why they're a bit more popular and they're able to defend those low ranges far more easily. Let's see what the others are doing though. Here is Ferrite Carbide for Minmatar trying to do the bounce again. You can see some volumes as well as we went close to a 1-year low point here. Average price, let's see if I can get it, 86, but we just made our way back to 100. Sellers are already coming back in, 99.73, buyers are at 86. Yeah, it's not a Galente type collapse here, but it's definitely still not showing signs that this is over yet. And then tungsten carbide for Amar is now landing on 100 ISK, had a couple days just below that. Some volumes coming in here as well, but hardly moving the needle on price, 114 to 106. I would still be very, very careful when it comes to these advanced moon materials. Then we get the meta materials. Here is a Galente first, so photonic metamaterials, and this is another telltale sign that this might not be over. We're back under pressure as well, just going below 7.5 and apparently accelerating on the downside of things as well. 7,200 for the sellers, 6.8 for one buyer. That's it. This is really completely gone. Now this, one thing to remember, of course, is that this is tied to the Tech 2 economy, which is far more complex and is probably mostly done in low sec, in null sec, and a little bit in wormhole space. I think it's extremely hard to get Tech 2 going for an individual player, a small group, or in high sec, because you need stuff from all over the place, and as a result that might be why this market is collapsing here. But yeah, this is completely complete demand collapse for photonic metamaterials, and who knows how low this can go. So poor Galente for Tech 2, clearly struggling with no one seeing any interest in the item. Now eventually this could create the opportunity of a lifetime, but before that we would need to see sellers become so desperate that they just completely crash this market into oblivion, and then that we find that real bottom. But yeah, it might not have been found yet. Let's see how the others are doing. Here is non-linear metamaterials for Caldari, holding on to just above 12,500, 12,750 for the sellers, 12,550 for one buyer, and doing a little bit better, or a lot better than the Galente side of things. Then for Minmatar, it's plasmonic metamaterials, right? Wavy pattern, low point at 10,000 ISK, and we are back under pressure. Look at those minimum prices here, starting to fall off a cliff. I think 12,000 for the sellers. No, it's actually okay. 11, 10,900 for the buyers. You got a little bit of room before we come into that 10,000 ISK range again. And then for Amar, no, it's the metamaterials that we need. So here are terahertz metamaterials. That's not such good news. 1 year low point here as well. Well below 10,000 ISK, 9.3 to 8,700. At least there is some demand in JIDA for terahertz metamaterials. So that's really a little bit surprising. We are clearly seeing the Galente side of things struggling like never before with a complete just collapse of demand. Let's see what the other advanced movement materials are doing. I don't think it's going to be good news. Here is fermionic condensate. You can see those minimum prices starting to head back below 40k as well. Yeah, demand just dropping off the face of the earth, 44,000 to 39,000. Here is ferrogel, minimum prices not yet collapsing to the 1-year low points, but heading below 20k. Below 20k for the sellers, 19,350 for the buyers, slightly better, but definitely not great. Then we got fullerite. All right, we do have an exception, shooting back to 700 and probably making its way down slowly. No, not slowly, quickly. 580 for the sellers, 564 for the buyers. This is going to be a small blip that's going to bring us right back there. Then we got hypersynaptic fibers, again showing signs of pressure, holding on a little bit better. 5 for the sellers, 5.4 for the buyers, so there is a little bit of demand still here. Nano transistors went below 2,500, is slightly up from that, so also showing some demand coming in. Phenolic composites, max prices shooting up here. Let's see what's happening. Yeah, just a completely drying up of supply, so the opposite of a lot of these, 1,200 to 1,000. That can eventually happen as well, of course, when prices go too low. Then we got pressurized oxidizers stabilizing at 1-year low point ranges, 7.4 to 7.2. Reinforced carbon fiber, same story, stabilizing at 1-year low point ranges, 6,600 to 6.2. Then we get ceramic fibers trying to hold on to 250 on not a lot of supply. All right. And so the general story here is it's still, in my opinion, very risky to call bottoms in the advanced movement material segment. We're seeing some real collapse of demand, especially in, for instance, crystalline carbonite. That's just absolutely terrible. No one is buying any of this stuff except for like the most opportunistic prices that they can think of at the time, which is really crazy. But as I've said, and you're getting the vibe from the subreddit as well, activity is super low, and then you know, it could happen in even more goods as well, which means that potentially the bottom prices are not in, and yeah, summer is about halfway done, not even that. So we still have the whole month of August where we don't have to expect any real updates to the game, if I'm not mistaken. We do get the live streams where CCP will potentially announce some stuff, but if I'm not mistaken there as well, the potential announcement for the faction warfare stuff, for the new stuff, is probably by the end of the summer. So this could be a really difficult but also very interesting summer from the market perspective. Let's see what's happening in Tech 2 ships then, coming in at 40.55. Let's see if we can spot anything here. So Caldari probably doing a little bit better, but the Galantia ships, that could be a real problem. Let's take a look here. Here is the Basilisk holding on to 150 million, still of course on the 1-year chart, not great, but away from the current 1-year low prices. 152 to 133 though. Let's see if I can get a 130 to show you. Here is a 130. So you can see that the buyers, yeah, they're very hesitant to go to much higher prices. Then we've got the Cerberus, a little bit of a double bump. I think Nullsec is in part at play here, 167 to 160, or just in general. I mean, the Cerberus is again a pretty damn incredible platform, and used to cost 250. You're paying just a bit above 150, so that's still pretty damn good. But yeah, you get light missiles option, heavy missile option, assault missile options, and if I'm not mistaken, you've got your only 3 small drones. It's not that great, but you get the Tech 2 resistances. You get an incredible shield with super versatile missile options. It's just a crazy good ship in almost all circumstances. Next up here is the Curse, which I forgot, to my shame. I wrote it down, but I forgot to go and buy a couple of them, and looks like, yeah, someone or some people were actually following me on this one. But we made that 1-year low point, was very, very noticeable. You can see here the volumes that have brought us back to a 150. So especially if you're thinking the same way I am, I'm looking for those 1-year low points, and then also ships that I find very interesting and that I could potentially see myself use, for instance, in faction warfare situation and things like that. As I mentioned here, the curse was doing really well for me, because can't be detected on a directional scanner. Definitely makes it an interesting platform. And so here you get the bump up back to 150, currently selling for 156. Buyers still at 127, so on a buy order you can still try to grab a cheap one, but obviously when we're down here for the average prices, it's a lot easier to grab one from a buy order than when we're way up here. But we'll see if pressure will mount it again and if another buy opportunity will form itself. But this is sort of an expected pattern, of course. At some point people also notice them, and when they have some unique abilities like the curse, I do think that some buying will happen there. Then we've got the Damnation, very flat here at 250 million, 267 to 240. Is a Damnation another missile platform? Yeah, it is a missile platform, but of course an armor ship, so a little bit different. And I already have 2 Damnations if I'm not mistaken. So although, you know, right now buyers are below 250, yeah, they're at 240 million ISK for a Damnation, right? Started here at the year at 500 million, so below half price. Really crazy stuff. I would say right now, if you want to buy a Damnation, you can see the pressure, and even those minimum prices seem to still be going down as well. This is the time to grab one. I personally don't have an interest in that because I already have a couple that, yeah, used to cost me, that have cost me 450, 500 million ISK, of course. Next here is the Deacon, definitely slowing down here as well, seeing some pressure. Look at those minimum prices staying below 15 million ISK, 17.5 to 14.3. Then we've got the Eagle that I think had a wartime bump here in June, where, yeah, potentially some Eagle fleets might be fielded by some groups that were beating the war drums, but things have quieted down quite substantially all of a sudden, and then you can see that we're right back to that low range, and probably oversupplied as well from the perspective that it's 126 million for the sellers, 118 for the buyers. Not my favorite combination. I do think it's gonna be hybrid turrets, yeah, hybrid turrets, but it also has shields, but it's and 5 small drones. Fitting wise, you've got 6 mid slots, so really, again, potentially this is an awesome ship. If you have interest in flying this one, you can look at the chart, then grabbing a couple absolutely makes sense at this point. I myself am definitely pleased with some of the other options that I have already bought. Here is the EOS Galente command ship, which again I bought on this dip. Here is the next one, touching 250 again, 252 for the sellers, to 36 million for the buyers. So it's again a demand side drop here. There's just too much supply for the current market. They have to drop prices to super low prices. The Ares is actually slightly bumping back up to 42 million for the sellers, but still below 33 million for the buyers. So the buyers are just not budging. This is then like a temporary stop of supply, I think. Actually, a little bit is coming in as well. But then down here you get 57 days is their volume that have, yeah, maybe here a bit of purchasing that has brought those sell prices up to a certain range. It's slowly being filled. I think that's what happened here. Then we've got the Flycatcher. Buyers at around 40 million, 42 to almost 50 million for the sellers. Next here is the Guardian, right back at the low range. Buyers well below 130, 120 for the buyers, 127 for the sellers. You can definitely grab some cheap Guardians at the moment. Next here is the Heretic. So here are the volumes that have brought the sell prices up towards 40 million ISK, 41 for the sellers, 33 to 34 million for the buyers. So it just opens up massive margins. The demand really isn't there. This is potentially investors, but potentially, and I basically hope so for those people that are buying the big volumes, also purchases because they're planning to use those ships. Because you might actually be stuck with even hounds at 20 million with actually expensive hounds. So selling for 20 million, buyers are at 17 million. Again, a little bit more response, right? You do see this here, buyers below 15 million, very pronounced buy opportunity, especially right here on this sound. You're grabbing them for less than 15 million, super easy. They are selling at 20 million, that's tradable, 25%. You do still have a big margin, but you can see that it's well away from that below 15 million mark. And so this is also what I mentioned. If you're looking to actively trade stealth bombers, smaller ships with big volumes, that's what I would have been looking at. And here you can see that opportunity right now, for instance, for the Hound. Then we get the Ichthyrsa to keep an eye on Triglavian stuff. Also pretty, well, I'm not going to say inexpensive, but it is of course still 510 million for the sellers, 473 for the buyers. But on this 1 year chart, it's actually at a relatively low price point. The Ishtar went below 130 million and on not a lot of volumes makes its way away from that bottom range. We're currently selling for 136, buyers still at 125. Buyers out of luck at this point, right? You can see that minimum max prices are above 130, so you have to go for those sellers at the moment. But it was on this slump that you had the opportunity to buy really low. But is this the end? Well, I don't know. I think demand for the Ishtar should stay a little bit more robust than, let's say, the carbides and things like that. And if things completely dry up in that market, that could give the Ishtar a little bit of breathing room from that perspective. But in general, of course, Galente not doing that well. Here is the Kirin. After reaching almost 25 million for the sellers, going back down a little bit, 20 for the buyers, 17 million for the sellers, but sort of the same story, right? Went below 15 million or touched 15 million on the buy side of things just about 1.5 months ago. Small ship, logistics frigate, also shields and Caldari, so there was definitely a bit of a trade to be had in this one. Then we've got the Manticore, and that's tradable, right? You're well below 20 million, probably 16, 15 million 2-3 weeks ago. Then you jump up to above 25 million. We're recovering from that, and buyers are starting to drop in price here as well. But you can see that difference where on some of those larger ships, those buyers are just staying in that range for most of the time. Here on the Manticore, they're forced to be up a little bit more because there are higher volumes, it's a smaller ship, and as a result this has, in my opinion, more trade potential. Selling at above 20, buyers at 18 million, only a 2 million margin between sellers and buyers. You don't see that very often, but yeah, this was another one of those potential trades. Nemesis then, same story, right now in a sell opportunity, currently selling for 18.6 million, which doesn't look like a great price, but it is. 15.5 for those buyers as well, because you could have bought this for 12.5 million, so that's a 6 million, yeah, that's a 50% increased price pretty much in about a month as well. So buying here on the Nemesis would have been a really good idea. And again, that same difference, right? Volumes not as good as some of the others, but at least it's like probably 40-50 a day pretty easily, and thus those buyers are forced up as well on that upside trend. One big purchase has the opportunity to create a nice sell opportunity, and at least there's enough moving on the daily basis that you can sell your, as I've said, 2, 4, something like that. That would be my range for the Nemesis, for the stealth bombers. You can sell those now at those profits. Next up here is the Nighthawk, still up a little bit, so it is Caldari. It's got a bit of premium, 307 for the sellers, 264 for the buyers. Then we've got the Oneros, also flat away from the bottom, but that's still relative, 121 to 107. That's pretty damn cheap. The Purifier, right, about 2 weeks ago had that sell opportunity. Buyers are starting to make their way back to 15 million, still 16.5 for a first one, but who knows? With enough pressure, we could be back on a buy opportunity for the Purifier as well. Then the Rook might be me again. I do think I mentioned that I had an interest in buying Rooks from time to time. Probably some of my purchases will move the market as well a little bit, but 184 for the sellers. But a big difference again with those stealth bombers. Look at where those buyers are at, although they're not able to materialize the trades. They're at 150 million, opening up a 30 million 30 million, which is not insignificant margin between sellers and buyers. And so yeah, if you bought down here at like 130 million, you have a sell opportunity. But what's the difference? Yeah, 4, 5 a day if you're lucky is what's being traded, so you can't sell 4 rooks at the full profit here, so you gotta go for the smaller volumes, and it's far more risky that way. Then we get the Saber, still stuck below 40 million, not much to say. Scalpel, minimum price is starting to play with 10 million ISK, yep, 10 million, but supply is not enough here either, so that's a surprising volume on something that, right, so why would I not risk actively trading with 2-4 scalpels? Well, just because of those daily volumes, they're just not enough. Then we get the Scimitar, 130 and below, yep. All right, Sleipnir slightly up, making its way back to 250 million, 265 to 240. And actually slightly better volumes on this one as well. I'm a bit surprised. Vagabond, 1 year low point pretty much. And then finally we get the Zarmast that is still below 500 million ISK. It's quite doable, 485 to 440. Also not a lot of demand in these. So I would say the Tech 2 ship market for me still the same story. I'm looking for those 1 year low points, those really cheap ships, combined with something that I actually can see myself have use for in the future. So it doesn't have to be a trade option. If you're looking to actively trade, well, at the moment we're probably a little bit late, or you're in sell order territory for a lot of the stealth bombers. They're still my favorite go-to as an option on that one, if you are looking to just buy in order to sell pretty quickly at a profit. Anything else, I would say have plans to actually use them. Like here, the EOS is back in that perfect range for me, right? And it is pretty unique. It is the only, if I'm not mistaken, the only battle cruiser that can field 5 heavy drones. That does make it pretty unique in some PvE circumstances. I think it's very useful. 252 to 236. I'm pretty confident on this downslope here that you're able to pick one up for like 240 or just above that, which is a really, really good price for an EOS that is normally, or was normally, 400 million ISK, for instance. So yeah, that's the Tech 2 ship market. Let's take a look at the Tech 3 ship market at 55 minutes. There we go, and as always we start with the destroyers, which I think will still be suffering from being basically too expensive to see big volumes, and thus at the moment we're talking 54 million for the sellers of the Confessor and 47 million for the buyers. Seeing a little bit of pressure on this one, but you can also see that the volumes are starting to go down. I think, yeah, here those 3 days and then today so far not a lot, so I think that we'll just potentially stall this out. Then we get the Hecate, right, settling at 55 as well. Minimum price is going back down quickly here, 55 to 51.5 million. A bit of margin opening up here on this one. If we're seeing continued pressure, maybe a buy opportunity could be on the books, because the Jackdaw is doing the exact same thing. All 3 of them, 55 million for the sellers. Buyers starting to drop out a little bit, 57 for this one, 51 million for the buyers as well. Slight premium on the Jackdaw, but in general, all of these are seeing a little bit of pressure, and all 3 of them doing the same thing at the same time. That is kind of interesting. If we would drop off well below 50 for the buyers all of a sudden, I might consider that a jump in opportunity. But the one thing to note, of course, is that 40 million was back in the day. That's far more doable to field a fleet of Jackdaws. Again, as I said, I think last week, compare this to like how much cheaper command ships are, how much cheaper Tech 2 cruisers are. Why are you going to spend 55 million on a Tech 3 destroyer? It's probably not going to be for big fleets and things like that just yet. And so as long as they're out of the meta, very risky to be trading in these. Then we get the Zwepel, still basically going nowhere, 48 million to 44 million for most buyers. But yeah, this one is so niche at the moment that the market has become so small as well. I don't see it happen, right? I don't see that one making a comeback. Maybe something could be brewing in Confessor, Hecate, Jackdaw, right, where eventually prices go down enough that a null-sec entity does decide to buy them, but it does feel a lot more risky than a year ago. On the cruiser front, I think last week looked pretty juicy. So here is the Legion that did go well below 180, even below 170 for the buyers. I think I called that a buy opportunity. We're at 181 for the sellers and 175 for the buyers. So the upward swing is starting to show here. The question is, can we go back to 190? Can we create a buy opportunity? But yeah, quite noticeably, you could have bought some of these below 170. Then we got the Loki that did the same thing and is also forming that bottom close to 180 on the bottom range here, 198 to 181. I still think you can try to jump in. It might be just too late, but you are looking at, on this 1 year chart, pretty inexpensive Lokis at the moment as well. Proteus, not enough for me just yet. I'd love to get Proteus lower than most of the others, 189 to 179 though. You're buying a Proteus below 180, your choice to make. And then finally the Tengu is actually starting to go back up here as well, 185 to 173. You're still buying a Tengu well below 180 million at the moment. I'd say we're close to ending the buy opportunities on the Loki and the Tengu. Legion is probably already over. And then we'll see if we can get enough volatility in this to actually have a worthy trade on this one. But yeah, Tech 3 cruisers far more likely to yield you a profit for trading than the Tech 3 destroyers at the moment. And then we still have the extra product for the week, and I chose the faction battleships. But I'm going to quickly drink here for a moment. So we'll take 5910 for the faction battleships. Just want to get a feel of this. Right here we just saw a little bit of pressure on the tactical destroyer market, which is part of the gas issue at the moment. That's also causing super high prices for the faction ships, and we'll see if that's also what's happening in the battleships. So faction battleships, we'll start with pirate. Here is the Barghest, slowly going down a little bit, but that's relative, of course. Still 1.1 billion for the sellers and buyers above a billion as well, showing that demand even here is actually really strong. That's a super narrow margin. So these are still very, very expensive, but you're seeing a little bit of pressure. Macariel, a little bit different. Actually up in the last week or so on not enough supply, 864 million to 767 million. Then we've got the Nestor going for more than a billion as well. Nightmare still going for more than a billion. Balgorn back up above 700 million as well. All right, Rattlesnake costing almost a billion. Yeah, above a billion for the sellers, 900 plus million for the buyers. And finally the Vindicator going for almost 1.5 billion. So pirate faction battleships are still crazy expensive. Let's see what the Navy faction ships are doing. Here is the Thunderchild, still costing 750 million as well. A unique one, of course, the Edencom version. Apocalypse Navy issue, 500 million for an APOC Navy issue. Armageddon Navy issue, 550. Dominic's Navy issue, 700 million. Megatron Navy issue, 630. Yeah, we're not really seeing signs that this is like structurally changing. Raven Navy issue costing almost 600 million ISK. Scorpion Navy issue, 500. Tempest Fleet issue, 600 million. And then the Typhoon Fleet issue, even this one that always used to be a little bit cheaper than a lot of the others, almost 600 million for the sellers and 500 million for the buyers. Definitely a bit more margin between sellers and buyers in the Navy faction ships. Pirate faction ships are just super expensive. I'm actually kind of curious, so we are going to take a quick look at the Tech 2 versions then. Yeah, look at that. A Redeemer is now below a billion ISK. Then we get Kaldari. Here's a Vito going below a billion. Sin going for 750 million. Minmatar Panther going for a billion. And then on the Marauder fronts, we've got the Paladin. What does that cost at the moment? 1.1 billion. Here's the Golem. 1.3 billion. What's the chart looking like? Definitely, right? That Tech 2 pressure is coming in here as well. Then we've got the Kronos going below 1 billion, and then the Varger going below 1 billion as well. Yeah, they are very, very different chips, of course, but why would I spend 1 billion ISK on something like a Barghest when I can spend a little bit more than that but get a Golem? For me, yeah, if you're looking for the value for the battleships, I'd go to Tech 2 versions, at least cost wise. And what I don't have, so what I'm gonna consider here now myself, is maybe to get one of these Black Ops battleships. I'm not sure which one I would choose just yet. It will depend a little bit on what I want to do with it. But yeah, if I look for instance onto a Widow on a 1-year chart from well above 1 billion, now well below 1 billion. If you're looking for a battleship purchase, it's gonna be just like with the cruisers, battle cruisers, command ships, things like that. I would say Tech 2 is what you should be looking at. The faction versions are still crazy expensive at the moment, and I wouldn't want to lose a 1 billion ISK rattlesnake. Yeah, it is great, but that Tech 2 tank though, for instance a Golem, for pretty much the same price, for me it would be the Golem then at the moment. So yeah, very interesting to me, a reversal here, whereas faction battleships were like your step up from Tech 1. Now you might just go Tech 1, Tech 2, and then the faction battleships, not really sure why you want to use them at this point, but this is all of them across the board are like super expensive. 1 billion ISK for like a non-regular Tech 1 type of battleship. Maybe I'll quickly actually look at those as well. Battleships, standard battleships, they are probably down in, well, no, 250 million. Apocalypse, 300 million, 250, pretty average. That's actually also still pretty expensive. So a quick look at the Dominic's, for instance. That was my first mission ship, 300 million at the moment. That's actually still pretty expensive, which I think is part of that demand for those minerals, those high-sec minerals, that is keeping things from crashing down. Okay, interesting. Quick look at the battleship market there. I would say the cheap ones now are, well, the Tech 2 battleship that used to be like the real exceptions that you would only buy, and were far more expensive than anything else. Well, the faction battleships have actually caught up to them, at least the pirate faction ones. So I'd be careful when it comes to flying and buying battleships, but if you're looking for something to work your way towards, I'd shoot for that Tech 2 at the moment. It's just relatively cheap compared to everything else. Anyways, that's it for this Eve Talk then, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.